Right, and it's interesting, and you hear like Yeonmi Park when she was speaking out recently, talking about coming from one of those countries, and I had the opportunity to speak to another North Korean defector, and the one thing that he said that always stuck out for me was that we know what they're teaching us about the rest of the world isn't true, but at the same time, because we don't have any other access to information, we don't know what true is, right? So we know that history isn't this caricature necessarily. And we know that the rest of the world, the United States is not some kind of like, what do they say? They always play up like racial disparity in the United States. They always play up the violence. It's not like a shooting gallery. Like clearly it's a very strong country. It's a very successful country. So it can't be the way that they're talking about. But we don't really know what it's like. They didn't even know what South Korea was like, right? Because they can't peer over the horizon on their own, right? They have to see everything through that lens. So I thought that was really interesting. And I think that, when I just having the years I spent in China, it seemed to me that as people got older, they kind of started to have that realization. But at the same time, because, they're like anybody else, they've got families, they got jobs, they've got kids. So they're like, well, yeah, we know the system is the way it is, but what are we going to do about it, right? We just want what's best for our family.
I think this is a big failing of sort of America's response to the Chinese Communist Party, that it's often viewed from the lens of competing nations rather than a fundamental ideological struggle.
Yeah. So, I mean, the United States for so many years had operated under this fallacy, right? That the fall of the Soviet Union came about because liberal democracy was better, and that the U.S. version of this sort of secular, capitalistic, free market enterprise system was the best. And the system of international liberalism through these programs like the United Nations and the WHO, et cetera, were going to work. And so it was almost like buying into. So in Marxism, there's that idea of kind of the historical cycle, right? This is the way that history is moving, and it'll eventually turn to socialism, and then socially eventually turns into stateless communism, right? And so it's almost like in the West that people had, after the fall of the Soviet Union, had told themselves, well, this is the way of the world, right? This is universal, that these beliefs, these precepts are universal. And this is where you get in the late 90s, early 2000s, and specifically the response to 9/11, you get nation building, right? And then so they embark upon these nation building exercises in the Middle East. And they say, well, I mean, everybody wants to be democratic and have parties and have multi-party voting. And that's what we're going to do. And we're going to have these civil rights. And it's very Lockean. And it's all going back to all of these things and trying to pose that on cultures that have never had anything like that, even started, right? have no cultural norms or even cultural ties whatsoever. We're talking about the Middle East. And then so you have those same people deluding themselves into thinking that if we just, the response to Tiananmen Square was to increase trade ties with the PRC. Think about that, right? In what other situation would that ever be the response, right? Because they're looking at it as, well, if we just expose them to more of our system, then they'll become more like us.
Yeah, if I murdered a bunch of people, no one would be like, hey, we should give that guy more money. That'll stop him in the future.
Yeah, let's just fund them more, right? No, you would say, hey, cut those guys off. We need to do something about this. This is a problem. We would never approached the Russian Communist Party like this. We've never approached the Soviet Union like this after one of their massacres. And so when it comes to that situation, you can actually see things changing in a different lens where instead, and this is something that I actually have an op-ed that's coming out pretty soon, and I don't necessarily, I'm trying to make a big plug for it, but it's going to be up at Human Events later this weekend, where I talk about how if you look at the numbers of it, right? So the CCP is about 92 million members for 1.4 billion of the population of China. And so it's like 1%, but it's actually like 0.6%, it's less than 1%. But thinking of it in terms of the 1% is actually very useful for us because they have their 1%, and in the United States and the greater West, of course, we have our 1% as well, right? Call them the ruling class, the elites, the oligarchs in many cases, right? When you talk about finance or Silicon Valley. And so when you look at this connection between their 1%, the CCP, and our 1%, which side has influenced the other, right?
Great point.
Our 1% have not become their 1% have not become more open-minded and liberal and allowing for democracy and civil rights. No, our 1% have become more authoritarian, more forceful, more demanding. And you can see this, by the way, it's so amazing. So Charlie Munger of Berkshire Hathaway, this, 97 years old, he's kind of known as the brains behind the operation there at Berkshire. Warren Buffett, of course, the Oracle of Omaha and everything. But really, Charlie Munger, he's very, very revered for people on Wall Street. And I wrote this whole op-ed before he goes and gives this interview with CNBC. And he says he's praising the CCP in their treatment of Jack Ma, the way they shut him down, the way they disappeared him, right? He said, I wish that we had, he catches himself. I wish we had that, not their whole system, but certainly the financial system of China. I wish we had here in the United States, and why the government should just be able to shut down people they don't like and stop people they don't like. And what was Jack Ma doing? He was trying to get the average Laobaixing Chinese person more involved in banking and spread banking and a lot of these financial tools out throughout the general population in China. That's what they shut down because they didn't want that amount of financial and economic freedom being spread throughout the country. And so who do we have in the United States proposing this and promoting it and praising it? It's Charlie Munger, one of the richest people in the United States, clearly someone, a titan, absolute titan of Wall Street. The closest thing you could have to a Western oligarch saying, oh my gosh, I love this system. Why can't we do that here in the United States? Right. So that's when I talk about this marriage between their 1% and our 1%. It's been a marriage that's influenced the West. It hasn't influenced that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just Charlie Munger. You've got people like Michael Bloomberg, who praised the way that the Chinese regime did their massive and very brutal lockdowns during COVID.
Yep.
You've got people like Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, who's, adopting these kind of, I guess you'd call them censorship strategies, asking people to potentially, let them know if there's people who might be extremists.
Yeah, that's just in the last 2 days.
And can I just say how brave it is of you to be saying this in Tiananmen Square?
Well, I actually do have I've never posted it, but I have a photo of myself in Tiananmen Square from, I want to say it's 2008. And it's it's midnight from June 3rd going into June 4th. So it's just turned June 4th. So it's the night of the anniversary. And I'm standing there pretty close to the front, and it's just me flipping off Chairman Mao and his giant portrait over the Tiananmen Gate. And I kind of find it. It's like one of my favorite pictures, though.
Well, speaking of that, I think a lot of people watching might be more familiar with you as sort of a American political commentator and don't know about how much you know about China. So for people watching, why don't you give a quick rundown of how you know China?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting, right, that behind the scenes, I've been a China guy for going back almost 15 years now. To my first visit in China was 2006. So yeah, that's 15 years.
Impossible. 2008 wasn't 15 years ago.
2006 was 15 years ago.
2006. Yeah.
No, that was like 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, it's not that long. It can't
I know, right? Tell me about it. So it's, yeah, when you want to really start feeling old, think about how long ago 1980 was. Yeah, pretty fun, right? We're as far now from the 80s as the 90s were from the 1950s. So boom, have fun with that. So in 2006, I did my first trip to China, was so interested in it, had the opportunity to go as an undergrad, decided I wanted to do a study abroad there, ended up doing the study abroad for my last semester of college, and then had an internship for the American Chamber of Commerce. And then one of our sort of clients at the chamber there in Shanghai had said, hey, what are you doing after graduation? I said, I don't know. I was going to travel. I was going to do whatever. And they said, well, do you want a job? I said, sure, I'll have a job. So I ended up working for an American consulting firm there in Shanghai, right on Nanjing Lu, and had the opportunity to travel all over China doing business with, kind of as a representative of American business and American firms there, literally throughout the country. And then even on my own, had the opportunity to travel to Tibet, to Xinjiang. When I got back, I decided that I wanted to, people said, look, do you want to stay working in U.S. China business? You can make a lot of money doing this consulting work. I learned the language while I was there. So I was doing intensive language courses and got really into the history, not only of the CCP, but of the country itself, and especially the city of Shanghai. And I said, no, I wanted to try to do something from an American sense, right? And I don't think that business is the right way to do it. Because I was worried about the CCP and I was worried about the rise of their power, not only in Asia, but also throughout the world. And I viewed it as a threat to the United States. And so I joined the United States military, picked the Navy because I knew the Navy had the most international focus. They had the most focus on China, and then ended up serving for about 8 years, first as an intelligence analyst, then later as an intelligence officer. I was a Mandarin linguist while I was in, so did multiple deployments to East Asia as part of that, working on different task forces, working on different planning groups for different things within what was at the time was called PACOM, Pacific Command. Now it's called Indo-PACOM, so the Indo-Pacific Command. So they wanted to kind of add India into that because technically India isn't in the Pacific, right? It's the Indian Ocean or Pacific Ocean. And really just learned a lot, learned so much about it. And then, 2016 rolls around, and that's really when my public profile started taking off within the United States in terms of just domestic politics. But I really viewed so many of the forces and the pressures of domestic American politics, tied into this idea of whether the United States was in international decline and domestic decline. I would argue both. And that led to the outcome of 2016. And so much of that, right, is being in part driven by China. It's being driven by the American 1%, by the Western 1%, and is being taken advantage of by the CCP in terms of this relationship, which goes back to, the outsourcing that I viewed while I was there, the outsourcing and the manufacturing that was going on. So much of these factories, so many of these investments are all going into China. And when you look at it, and the business owners there and the representatives of these companies, the vice presidents, the people who get sent over as, hey, you're going to be our China office manager, you're going to be our China VP, our Shanghai VP, our Guangzhou VP, whichever it is, it's all a cost benefit to the company kind of situation. But it didn't seem like anybody was paying attention to the effect it was having on international relations or paying attention to the effect it was having on the United States of shipping that bulk of the American backbone of manufacturing to China and shipping all of those jobs to China and to away from, the United States, particularly the Midwest and in the Northeast, where I'm from the Philadelphia area originally. And so, learning about all that and seeing it, I said, why this just doesn't seem, it never sat right with me. Something seemed wrong about it. So, it's very interesting to me that when we think about all of these issues that we're talking about today on a regular basis, on that these are commonplace issues. This is what I was thinking about, 12 years ago, 11 years ago, 10 years ago, and wanting to do something about.